Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Selling Greenville, your favorite real estate podcast here in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm your host, as always, Stan McCune, realtor right here in Greenville, South Carolina, and you can find all of my contact information in the show notes. If you need to reach out to me for any of your real estate needs. Just a reminder, as always, if you like this show, please like, rate, review, subscribe, all those good things with regard to the show so that you don't miss episodes in the future. I'm also doing a Facebook Live for this right now. Of course, if you're listening to this after the fact, you're not gonna really, that's not gonna really matter to you. But if you're watching on Facebook, please go ahead and find my show Selling Greenville on pretty much every podcast platform that's out there, and give it a like, subscribe to it, all of those good things. Okay, I did a little thing on Facebook recently where I asked people if they had any questions for a potential Q&A episode. And we did get some questions, not a ton of questions. So if your question was missed, or if you had a question, didn't see my post, or maybe you're not connected with me on Facebook, which by the way, you can, if you want. All my socials are at Stan McCune. So just let me know if you have questions that you want to address. Sometimes I just take one off. If a question's really good, I can do a whole episode on it. In fact, really, any of these questions I could have done just about a whole episode on. So just let me know. I'm always interested in, I want to produce content that my listeners actually want to hear. So please let me know if there's anything like that. But we're going to start right at the top. I'm going to answer every single question. I got just a handful of questions here. Start with Andrew Brooks. Andrew, good guy, by the way. If you need someone to help you with roof-related things, specifically diagnosing roof-related things, or if you're a realtor and you need a roof report, right? There's a buyer who is concerned that a roof is leaking or something like that, or that there's an issue with it. Andrew has really come through in the clutch for me a few times on these sorts of things. So if you're a realtor, you're listening to this, you want his information, please let me know. I'm happy to share that. Okay, Andrew asks, when will we see 5.5% interest rates again? I need an exact date, please. Okay, so a half serious, half unserious question, right? Because I can't predict the future. And I always tell people, don't time the market. Never, never, never time the market. If you're waiting for rates to fall, you're doing the wrong thing. Perhaps, unless you just can't afford what's out there, right? If rates falling is the only way that you can afford to move, then that's a whole nother matter. But if you're just trying to time the market, I never recommend that. Just like with anything, stocks, crypto, this is an investment advice, but it's general good advice for life. Don't try to time these sorts of things. That being said, I have an answer for you, Andrew, okay? And it is November 4th, 2026, okay? Write it down. November 4th, 2026. That's when we're going to see 5.5% interest rates again. Where did I come up with that date? Well, the midterms are November 3rd, 2026. So if we're going to see any rates come down in the next couple of years, because the reality is that the current state of our government and the kind of thing that's going on with the Fed right now, and the president kind of not happy with the Fed, I don't see rates coming down. The bond market, of course, is a part of all of this as well. The bond market doesn't really seem to like what the president's doing. They don't hate it, but they don't love it. They're kind of stuck in the mud. All of these things impact mortgage rates. And so the long story short is, I think the greatest likelihood we have in the next 2 years of rates coming down is immediately after that election. And they might go back up, right? Because this is what happened, actually. When Trump was elected, right around the time of the election, rates actually did come down to the low sixes. And when I say they came down, I'm talking about per aggregator websites like Mortgage News Daily. Again, every single person can potentially qualify for a different rate, right? If you're looking at Mortgage News Daily right now, I think the rates are around 6.9%. A lot of people can get better than that. Some people would end up being worse than that. You need to talk to a mortgage lender to know for sure one way or the other. I can't do that for you. I can't determine that for you. But in terms of like looking at aggregator websites like that, I see The most likelihood being when there is a big changeover in the government, because we literally just saw that happen this past year. And so, Andrew, look out. November 2026. If it's going to happen in the next 2 years, that's when I think it's going to happen. Jeff Gaskell, Jeff, a friend of mine from way back when I was a child in New Jersey. Jeff was in charge of my youth group growing up. So Jeff, thank you for weighing in here. This is a hypothetical question because he does not live in Greenville, but I really do appreciate the question. He has two questions, okay? And I'll answer them each separately. First question, how will you market my home I'm selling? That's a great question. I just want to start by saying this, because this is something a lot of people don't fully understand. A lot of people confuse pricing with marketing. Now pricing is something that a realtor needs to be heavily involved with for a variety of reasons. But at the end of the day, pricing is not marketing, okay? So here's what I'm saying with this. If your house is worth $300,000 and you list it for $315,000, there's no marketing in the world that can overcome that. Like, that is just the reality. Any realtor that tells you otherwise is lying, and they're just trying to get you to sign on with them. And actually, this is a tactic that a lot of realtors will use, is they will listen to the seller say that they want to overprice their home, and the realtor thinks, you know what, I just need to get the listing, and eventually the seller will agree to reduce the price to where it needs to be. That is not a strategy that I like to use. I feel like that's a disingenuous strategy. And so people need to understand that. A lot of realtors, when they're doing listing presentations, they lead with pricing. And I really try not to do that. And unfortunately, a lot of sellers want to do that, right? When they want to have that initial conversation, they all, like, it's just front of mind. They just want to hear, what do you think my house is worth? And I understand that, right? Because I'm considered an expert in my field, in the field of real estate. And that's like a very useful question, a very valuable question to have the answer to from my experience that I have in all of that. That being said, that's not marketing, okay? The real value in a realtor is not finding a realtor that can determine the price that your home is worth. That's actually very easy. For most homes, it's very easy. The real value is in the marketing. So first off, I always do a home consultation where we go through the home and see, okay, what are the things that need to happen in terms of decluttering the home, in terms of depersonalizing the home? Is there staging that needs to happen? Is there unstaging that needs to happen? That's part of the decluttering thing. Some people, I'll be honest, I have some clients that their home is already picture perfect when you walk in. And I have others that when I walk into the house, it's really in rough shape when you first walk in. So we'll go through, I'll walk you through, and really a lot of homes need some at least some basic repairs or pressure washing or things like that. I always start working through that with my clients with an eye to what are the most minimal things that we can do in order for the maximum bang for our buck, right? What are the smallest things that we can do in order to get your home as marketable as possible in order for you to get the most amount of money. And of course, I get a commission based on how much a home sells for. But at the end of the day, people get confused. They think that if their home sells for $10,000 or $15,000 more than it would have if they hadn't made updates, that I'm making a ton of money. You really do the math. It's really a lot more money for the seller than it is for the realtor. So really, we're doing that as realtors that do that, which any good realtor does. They're doing that as a service to their clients. So we start with that, and I'm not going to go through every single step in the process. But after that, I always have a professional photographer come through. My first listing I ever had, I had a client that they wanted to rush the listing, and they wanted to have their home sold yesterday. And they saw me as a newer agent, as someone that could quickly do it. I did rush it. I took the pictures myself. They weren't good. We didn't get showings. And after that, they pulled the listing from me. So my very first listing, I learned a very important lesson, which is if you have to rush it to the point where you don't use professional photography, you're rushing it too much. I also do videos for the listings. You can go back, you can look at some of the videos that I've done. This is something I've only recently started doing. I'm careful with virtual tours and other forms of video because at the end of the day, I want people to come into the home, right? That is what I want. I don't want people to view the home strictly from their computer. That's a problem, right? Because at the end of the day, the home sells itself, right? That is, you want the people to walk in and visualize themselves inside the home. And the only way to do that is if they actually get inside the home. And so that's everything that I do centers around that. And of course, put a house in the MLS, that gets syndicated out to all of the websites that are out there. And then we do, and I do, and my team does, we do an ad campaign that's really cool. I would show you an example, but I didn't even think about this until just recently, until I'm recording this. But basically, it's an ad campaign that shows your home using artificial intelligence to people that are looking at homes in the area, and it shows your home on websites that they're looking at, like MSNBC, like Fox News, even Amazon. I've literally had clients that have sent me a screenshot where they saw one of my listings and they were just like, how did this happen? On a website that they were frequenting. And that was because AI had identified that they were looking at similar homes, and they pushed that one to them. And of course, there's a whole lot of other things. We have my company, Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. We have incredible yard signs, these flag signs. I have to pay someone to install them because they're so insane. And of course, I pay for that. I pay for the professional photography, for the video editing, all of these things I'm paying for. Open houses, that's another thing. I don't typically lead with an open house. I feel like open houses are good strategies for homes that have kind of gone stale. So I actually had a listing recently where the listing had kind of gone stale. I decided to do an open house. What we did was we did a very small price reduction. Now, I personally don't like to do price reductions, just like, take the listing and just reduce the price and just move on, call it a day. What I like to do is I like to unlist the home and then relist it. It's a little bit more paperwork, particularly on my end. It's more of a process in the multiple listing service, but it's not that big of a deal. It resets the listing on some websites. It doesn't reset it in the multiple listing service. So you can still see, the days on market is still going to reflect from when it was originally listed. But it does reset on some websites, and it appears like a fresh new listing to new eyeballs that are seeing it. And I just did this recently where I had a listing, went stale. We had to reduce the price, which most listings right now, I think it's like 70% of listings right now are having to do price reductions. So that's pretty normal at the moment. We just did a $3,000 price reduction. And again, it wasn't a price reduction. We unlisted it, relisted it for $3,000 less, and then I did an open house right on the back end of that. So within just a couple of days, I did an open house, and within a couple of days of that, we got it under contract. So these sorts of things work. It's formulaic. It's a strategy that has worked over and over and over again. So those are some of the things. I didn't go through everything. There's a whole lot more social media campaigns and things that I do as well that some of you guys have seen if you're connected to my socials. But those are some examples. And then Jeff also asked, how many clients do you normally handle at the same time? Also good question. This is obviously real estate's really seasonal. Obviously real estate really, there are down markets, which we are in right now, and there are up markets, but generally I'm working with 10 to 20 clients at a time. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. During the, peak COVID craziness where, homes were appreciating 20% per year and, everyone was looking to buy something because mortgage rates were 2% or 3%, whatever. During that time, it wasn't uncommon for me to be working with 30 to 35 buyers. and sellers on top of that. It was crazy. I was working 70, 80 hours a week. And that was just what the life was. It was difficult. But I think my clients were happy. If not, you guys can let me know that. But everyone, to my knowledge, was happy and felt like they were getting full service from me. And if I ever feel like I can't do that, then I'm going to be having a conversation when I have a potential new client to let them know, you know what, this is not, I can't do this at this time. I'm going to have to connect you with someone else. That's extremely rare because I work my tail off for all of my clients, and it's not too often that I reach a point where it's just too much, right? I probably should have done a little bit more of that during COVID, not because of my clients, but because of my own mental health and physical health. On top of that, it was crazy. I spent an entire vacation just on my computer. Like, my kids were out on the beach and I was just on my computer just working. So I probably, for my own sake, shouldn't have done that. That was in 2021, the absolute craziest time of my career. But you know what? At the same time, sometimes you got to work when there is work, right? And now we're in kind of a real estate famine, as it were. I've told you guys before, right now, existing home sales are down to levels we haven't seen since 1995. A lot of people don't like fully comprehend just how staggering that is, because our population is so much higher right now than it was back then. And so these are the sorts of things. This is why, as a realtor, you can't just slack off, right? You've got to always be pushing. This is why I've been doing a podcast for over 5 years now. Why I don't miss a week. Why I record on Mother's Day evening like I am right now, because I don't think I'm going to have time on Monday or Tuesday to record. I always release on Wednesday. So there you go. All right. Shannon Mahone asks, are novations legal in South Carolina? Great question. So this is not going to be for everyone. Okay. So if you're not an investor, you might want to skip a few minutes. But long story short, novations are a way for a real estate investor to essentially assign a contract to another buyer, right? So if you want to novate a contract, rather than doing the traditional contract assignment where there's still the assignor and the assignee and the seller. So we have three parties. When you novate a contract, you remove the assignor from the equation entirely. And basically, you replace the old contract with a brand new one that now has a new buyer. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, again, if you're an investor, you know about wholesaling, you understand what wholesalers do is that they get a home under contract, let's just say for $100,000, and then they find another investor that is willing to buy it for $130,000, and then that investor ends up buying it. The wholesaler makes 30 grand, the seller makes 100 grand, or obviously 100 grand is their gross proceeds, not factoring in closing costs or anything like that. And then the buyer pays 130 plus their own closing costs, all of that. That's kind of how it works. Novation's kind of a similar process or a similar end result, except that the novated contract is a complete replacement to the original contract, whereas with assignment contracts, you've got all the original contract and all of that language still involved. Okay. Shannon or Michael, I'm not sure who asked this question. Is it legal or not? Okay. First off, I'm not an attorney. Okay. So this is what I think. It's not what I know. Talk to an attorney if you want to verify this. This is not legal advice or anything like that. So I can't say for sure if it's legal or not, but I can tell you what I think. And what I think is that it is legal. That's what I believe, and that's because I am on the scstatehouse.org, And it discusses, actually, if you're watching this on YouTube, I will actually share my screen here. All right, screen being shared. It talks about wholesaling. So this is something that was added this past year. It says wholesaling means having a contractual interest in purchasing residential real estate from a property owner, then marketing the property for sale to a different buyer prior to taking legal ownership of the property. Advertising or marketing real estate owned by another individual or entity with the expectation of compensation falls under the definition of a broker. It requires licensure. Wholesaling does not refer to the assigning or offering to assign a contractual right to purchase residential real estate. Okay, so definition here. Wholesaling means marketing a property you don't own. And you're not marketing it as a realtor using the methods that realtors are required to market. We have a lot of rules for how we market a property, okay? If you've heard of clear cooperation, that's what that's talking about. It's a whole thing. I'm not going to get into all of that. Contract assignments, believe it or not, Shannon, are still legal, okay? They have to be, right? Because 1031 exchanges and things like that require contract assignments. So wholesaling is, as defined by South Carolina law, has to do, the primary crux of wholesaling is the marketing bit, okay? Now, then later it says that this law says that you are prohibited from wholesaling. And it's illegal for agents to wholesale. It's illegal for anyone to wholesale. Okay, it's illegal. So in here, everything is focused on marketing with regard to how this law was structured. Nowhere in this law does this say anything about novations or novated contracts. Not addressed. But here is what I will say. If you market a property that you do not own to buyers, even if you aren't doing a contract assignment, right? Because this does not define wholesaling as assigning a contract, you are violating the wholesaling law, okay? As I understand it. So you could still be in violation of the wholesaling law even if you're doing a novation agreement. Because the wholesaling law is focused on how you're marketing, right? Now, if you do a novated contract and you convince the seller to allow you to market the property with a realtor on the multiple listing service, I don't know, maybe that would be allowed, right? That's a great question for an attorney. I think that there could be something there. But again, I can't give legal advice. That's a felony in South Carolina if you're not an attorney, so I'm not going to do that. But that's something perhaps to look into if you or someone else listening to this are looking for alternatives to real estate wholesaling. Eric Mitchell, Greenville, South Carolina. That's a great name, Eric. I don't remember when you changed your last name to Greenville, South Carolina, but that's great. I appreciate that. Eric Mitchell, Greenville, South Carolina asks, was it the chicken or the egg that was first? Eric, you know the answer to this, and it's really easy. It was the egg that was first, right? Because dinosaurs predated the chickens, right? We know that modern day chickens actually share a tremendous amount of DNA with T-Rexes. If you didn't know that, now you do. I'm educating y'all on a lot more than just real estate tonight. The dinosaurs laid eggs, right? They laid these gigantic eggs, and then it was much further down the road that chickens came, right? They had to evolve from those dinosaurs, and so yeah, the egg came first. Eric, come on, man, where you at? Now, in case you're wondering why I'm ragging on Eric, he's another realtor in my office. Love Eric, great guy. A lot of good times. A lot of good times with Eric. In fact, there was someone recently that came to me that was talking about real estate, and I found out that they had been working with Eric, and I said, you might want to talk to Eric about this. And so anyway, that all got worked out. But thanks for the question, Eric. I hope you're listening, because if not, that would be very, very sad. Amy Parsons asks, I'm just going to read what she says. I would love to see some advice to current homeowners who think at some point they may sell as to what renovations seem to be the best return on investment. Say I'm thinking about moving to my next size home. My current starter house could use a bathroom remodel, flooring, or kitchen upgrades. Assuming structural issues are okay, what should I invest in that I might make money back? Great question. Question that I get a lot. In fact, I believe I'm going to be doing an episode specifically on, not on this question specifically, but on some data that we have that came out recently from the National Association of Realtors on this very thing. So stay tuned for that. If I do that, it'll be in the next few weeks. But to answer your question, really, the way that I think about this, okay, let's start big picture. Every home has negatives, neutrals, and positives, right? What you want to do when you're selling a home is to objectively look at your home and what are the negatives. I say objective because you know what happens when I go into listing presentations all the time? These sellers will nitpick all of their neighbors, all of my comps, and they will come up with all these reasons why their house is better than all of their neighbors' home and better than all of the homes that have sold recently. And that's fine. People have an emotional connection to their home, and they know their home better than they know their neighbors' homes. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with any of that. But when it's time to sell, nobody looking at your home is going to be aware of any of those things that you believe that you are aware of. So you need to think about your home from the standpoint of a new buyer. And what is that buyer going to think when they step in? So what are those negatives? Here's what we want to do. We want to take the negatives and at the very least, turn them into neutrals. Turn them into something that won't be noticed. Take something that's very negatively noticeable and make it something that nobody will notice again. You've got that room that your teenager painted purple and orange because they're big into Clemson. Guess what? If you got a Gamecocks fan that comes through there, they're going to be triggered because they're easily triggered. University of South Carolina fans, with all due respect, very, very triggered. I just lost a bunch of potential clients saying that. Sorry to everyone. You want to take that and you want to neutralize it, right? Put a nice neutral paint color. That's just one example. You've got messed up countertops in your kitchen. And that's going to be something that someone very clearly sees when they walk in. You want to neutralize that. Now, here's the thing. With that example, you have the opportunity to turn a negative into a positive. And that is where the biggest gains come. If you can turn something that would be a complete turnoff into something that's now a feature, that is how you want to do it. So if you've got those kitchen countertops that are all messed up, maybe the kids painted on them, they're cracked, not level, who knows what. You have the opportunity now, rather than getting the cheapest possible replacement, to put a little bit more money in. And a lot of people don't realize, really, when it comes to countertops, they're not as expensive as you think. Well, they're expensive. I should say this. The difference between cheap and like top of the market in terms of materials, I'm not talking about like top of the market being like level 5 granite or level 5 quartz or something like that. But the difference between, say, a faux butcher block and a granite is not going to be as big of a difference as you think, because the labor costs are going to be comparable. The material costs are going to be higher for the granite. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be that much more. But the person getting that solid, beautiful stone versus the laminated countertop that you were going to replace it with on the cheap, that adds value. That turns the negative into a positive, and that's really what you want to do, okay? You also want to take as many neutrals as possible and turn those into positives too, right? Something when you walk into a space, and you know what these things are, okay? If you're a homeowner, you already know. Obviously, me as a realtor, I can come up with a fresh set of eyes, but I'm telling you, you the homeowner, you know, it's the things that you've always wanted to do. Those are the things that I'm talking about. You've always wanted to have a pantry, and you've got a space for it, but you just never put the pantry in. That's what I'm talking about, right? You've been able to get by without the pantry, and that might actually be a bad example because that's probably a negative. But again, that's a simple thing, a negative that you can turn into a positive. Adding a pantry is not, generally speaking, going to be that expensive. Just a small little pantry, right? Having that over having nothing, just cabinets that you're using, that's a huge value add. Okay, now all that big picture aside, talking about specifics, really, and again, I'm gonna most likely do an episode where I dive more deeply into this, so I'm not gonna get too specific, but kitchens, bathrooms, and the primary suite. Those are the three things that bring back the most return. If you can upgrade those things, that helps tremendously, right? Now, how much do you need to upgrade? Well, that depends on your house, right? If your cabinets are terrible, right? Some of them don't open properly. They've been painted many times over the years, and the paint is just worn out. The cabinets are worn out. Replacing the cabinets can go a long way. If the cabinets are in good shape, they just look worn. Maybe they just need to be painted, and that might be good enough. Bathrooms. A lot of times, people just need to replace their toilet and their vanity, and that's a really simple thing to do. Like that's a lot less expensive than people realize, and you typically do return more for your money when you do that. You might, have a really ugly tub. Maybe you need to just reglaze your tub, right? Because once you pull out a tub, that could be a whole thing. A lot of times that's not necessary. Maybe you just need to even just change, the fixtures on the tub and in the bathroom, things like that. In fact, fixtures are a great thing. That's light fixtures, hardware, handles, knobs, pulls, all of these sorts of things. That could be a really simple way to give your home cohesion, because a lot of people will have this little style over here, this little style over here, all sorts of different styles conflicting throughout the house, because you kind of piecemealed it over the years. Getting that to be cohesive so that when people are walking through the house, they're walking through an experience. They feel like everything is interconnected. That could be really useful. And then I mentioned primary suite as well. It's funny. People don't spend a lot of time, as much time as they think they will in their primary suite, but they give it a ton of value in their mind. And really, one of the simplest ways that you can add a lot of value there, beyond kind of what I've already discussed, is a nice closet system, right? You don't have to do it in every closet, but if you have a good sized closet, or actually perhaps even more importantly, if you have a poorly sized closet, putting in a closet system that really maximizes the space, that is going to be, again, turning either a negative or a neutral into a positive every single time. People love closet systems, and you don't need to hire a professional to do this. You can install a closet system yourself. I've done it many times. I personally, some people are going to hate this, I like the IKEA systems. They're very flexible, very simple to put in. And again, if it's not a luxury home, nobody is going to nitpick that you've got IKEA closet systems in the house. And they're cheaper than anything you can get at Home Depot or Lowe's or any of those options. So I am a fan of that, and I think that that's a very simple way to upgrade. Of course, there's a lot of exterior stuff. This depends on the home. Obviously, curb appeal is really important. There's only so much you can do about that for some homes, but you can pretty up the landscape, pressure wash. A lot of homes need exterior painting, and they're in denial about that. Exterior painting, nobody likes to do that, but it's necessary for a lot of homes, particularly on decks. A lot of decks, homeowners just get used to, or perhaps they don't even use the deck, so they're not even thinking about it. But they just get used to the appearance of the deck. And then when a buyer goes out there, they're like, whoa, this deck needs a lot of work. Again, that's something that you can do. I stained a humongous deck at my last house. Would I do it again? Probably not. To be completely honest, I would just try to squeeze in another closing somewhere in order to be able to afford to pay someone else to do it, because it was a tremendous amount of work. But that was just it was a 2-story deck, and it was the way it was laid out with my house. It was a lot. It was a lot. But an average person can do it. It's really not that much money. It's just a lot of time, a lot of labor. And so those are some things, Amy, that hopefully are helpful for you. And you asked another question, and this will be my final question that I'll be answering tonight. Amy asks, if you're thinking about putting your foot in the real estate market as a landlord, where do you start? Okay, so for someone that's looking to buy their first rental property, where do you start? I think you need to start with, what are your goals and expectations, right? I always, when I have a new potential investor client that reaches out to me, and for those that don't know me, this is how I got into this business. Is I started as a real estate investor. I still do real estate investments. I have several rental properties. I still flip houses on the side. Not a huge thing that I do, but something that helps to pay for the bills. I've always, investors have always made up 30 to 40% of my business. That's just been the way it is. When I have a potential new investor client reach out, I interview them. And it's a mutual interview to make sure that they're comfortable with me, but I'm also making sure that I'm comfortable with them. Because a lot of people come into investments and real estate investing for the first time with completely unrealistic expectations. They're thinking, oh, I'm going to make, 20% cash on cash, or I'm going to, be able to find something easily that's a 12 to 15 cap rate, or, I'm going to find something that, buy something at 70% loan to value after repair, all these sorts of things, which if you're an investor, you know what all these things mean. And if you're not, that's fine. You don't need to know what they mean, because honestly, a lot of those rules, in my opinion, you can just throw away, because they're not particularly helpful in every market. Every market's different. And when I say market, I mean both market in terms of the time that we're in, like we're in a very specific market, real estate market in 2025, but I'm also talking about different locations, right? The Greenville market is different than the Boise, Idaho market, or the Austin, Texas market, for instance. And so we need to start with expectations. What exactly are your expectations? Are you thinking that you're going to make a ton of money? Rentals, generally speaking, unless we're talking about mobile homes, right? Mobile home parks specifically, which are hard to get and basically very challenging to finance. Generally speaking, rentals are not a great way to make a ton of money. Okay, people need to understand that. To be able to, I hear people say that they want to get enough rentals to retire. That's hard to do. It's hard to accrue enough rental properties to be able to reach the point where you can just retire. They don't make as much money as people think. And I'm talking about all levels of rentals: long-term rentals, mid-term rentals, like 30 to 90-day rentals, or short-term like Airbnbs. It is not a cash cow. What rentals are great about, and I'm not an accountant, and it's not financial advice, of course, but they have some great tax benefits. And this is the savvy investors that when I know that I've got an investor that gets it, the first conversation we have when they're talking about rental properties is they're talking about the tax benefits and understanding tax write-offs, depreciating those assets and all of that. That's when I know, okay, I'm having a conversation with someone that gets it. If I have someone that leads with, I want to build a rental portfolio to retire in 5 years, and they don't have, several $1 million sitting in an account where they can just buy up a bunch of real estate, then we need to have a heart-to-heart conversation that your expectations simply aren't aligned with reality. For most people, a rental property is going to make them a little bit of money, right? On a year-to-year basis. But it's going to be a really nice tax write-off at the end of the day. That's what it's going to be like for most people. So I would say if you're thinking about putting your foot in the real estate market as a landlord, probably your first conversation needs to be with your financial planner and or your accountant. That would be where I would start. The next thing would be to talk to a realtor and discuss with a realtor what exactly your plans are. And I would personally talk to a realtor before talking to a lender. A lot of people purchase rentals with leverage, with financing. I would talk to a realtor first because, at least for me, working in the investor world as much as I do, I have access to a lot of lenders that I have built relationships with over the years that can do loans that are more creative than just your standard loan when you're just purchasing a random home. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. Have that meeting and then see where that goes, right? If you want to prepare for that meeting, again, my recommendation would be to be prepared with financially what it is that you're looking to do, and also what you're thinking in terms of what sorts of properties that you're actually interested in potentially having as a rental portfolio. And also, what's your exit strategy? You need to consider that as well. That's one of the most important things here, and you need to think about it right at the very beginning. Is your exit to have that rental property for the rest of your life? Well, I've got news for you. Not very many landlords do that, okay? So that's not an exit strategy. That is an idea, a concept of a plan, as our president would say, something like that. He said something like that. It's not an exit strategy. You need to be thinking, okay, what happens if this goes for 3 months vacant? What happens if it goes for 6 months vacant? You know what? One of the best things that I learned early on as a rental property owner and as a landlord, and I manage, I have a property manager for all my properties. I don't manage any of them directly for a variety of reasons. But one thing I learned very early on is you need to have an emergency fund for every single rental that you have. If you don't have an emergency fund for your rentals, then you're not prepared. Because guess what? When that rental goes vacant, you might need to put some money into it, and you're not going to have any money coming in. Not great, okay, if you're not prepared for that situation. And this is where so many landlords and landladies get caught. And this is where we see properties come on the market, duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes that need tons and tons of work. It was a landlord, landlady that stopped investing into the property, and very, very quickly it goes downhill. It does not take much for a property for the cascading effect of rental properties for the condition to continue to degrade and get worse. And so you need to be prepared for that. But back to the exit strategy bit. Think about what's your plan for this home in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years, and what's your backup plan and your backup to the backup. this is what people need to consider. And remember as well, you might end up getting a loan, depending on the type of property you're purchasing. You might end up having to get a loan that's like a 5-year loan. That's not uncommon, particularly in the multifamily space. And so you really need to be thinking very clearly, okay, 5 years out, what am I going to do? Because this loan is going to come due. Now, a lot of banks will renew it, but then you don't know in 5 years what mortgage rates are going to be like. They might be really, really bad. This is what's happening in the apartment space right now, is that a lot of these 5-year notes are coming due, and now the numbers no longer pencil for the apartment owners because they had a cushy rate on the loan that they had for those apartments before, and now the rate is double, or perhaps even worse than double. And so these are the sorts of things that you need to be thinking about. So I would start with probably talking to an accountant, financial planner, or someone that you get that sort of advice from. Talk to your realtor at that point, and then be thinking about all of these other things in the background. And then if it all makes sense, if after talking to all these different parties, then you're like, yeah, I'm ready. This makes sense. This fits in with my overall financial strategy, et cetera, make the move, okay? And actually purchase that property. And here's what I'm going to say. A lot of first-time renters, or not first-time renters, but first-time landlords, it's really hard to make that first purchase for a lot of them. Now, I have some of them that are like really aggressive. They know what they want. They move on it. They want to get that first one. But a lot of them, particularly in this market right now, they're struggling, right? Struggling to finally come off the fence. And so the more specific you are in your mind with what you're looking for, the less likely you are to get stuck like that. And so I always encourage my clients, try to be as specific as possible in your mind with what you're looking for, because I can help you more if you're more specific. I actually dislike when a client comes to me with a very broad buying criteria. You would think that's easier. No, it's way harder, because no one actually has a broad criteria in their mind. They all have a very, very specific criteria in their mind. But if it seems broad to me, that means they're not sharing something, right? Something needs to be shared. And so make sure that you crystallize in your mind what that is. What would it take for me to come off the fence and to purchase a property? What would that property actually look like? If you can actually come up with that and commit to that, then you can be successful purchasing your first rental property. All right. That's all I have for you guys today, or tonight as I'm recording this. Thank you guys so much for listening. All my contact information is in the show notes if you need a realtor in the Greenville area or outside the Greenville area. Remember, my company has a relocations department. Berkshire Hathaway Home Services is a very, very large nationwide, really international brokerage. So I can help you even if you're moving out of state or whatever it is that you're doing. Please let me know. And please, if you enjoyed this content, like the show, rate, review, subscribe. If you watch this on Facebook Live and you're interested in future episodes, look it up, Selling Greenville, on a lot of podcast platforms, pretty much all of them that I'm aware of, and on YouTube as well. You can find me on there at Stan McCune. You can find me on all my socials at Stan McCune. And I appreciate you guys so much as always for listening and watching. We will talk again next time.